And for more on our top line story, Iran uncertainty lifts oil above that $70 U.S. per barrel mark. Let's now bring in Brett Wilson, chairman of Canoe Financial. Welcome.
Always a pleasure.
A lot to talk about today. Let's first take a look at oil and the price of oil. This move higher that we've seen, you attribute it to what?
Well, there's strength in many reasons. We've been a bull on oil for a number of years in spite of $30, $40, then $50. Remember, we saw caps. We saw headlines that said 50 is the new cap. Then it was 60. And now it's 70. Oh, no, it's not 70, it's 80. And we're seeing the odd comment out of the U.S. saying $100 oil is possible. It's all about supply-demand imbalance. But short term, we get these spikes that are related to whether it's Trump taking a shot at Rocket Boy or Iran.
Let me just actually bring that up. We do have news coming across the tape that President Trump will make a decision tomorrow at 2 o'clock Eastern on Iran and Iranian sanctions. So we will, here is his tweet, I will be announcing my decision on the Iran deal tomorrow from the White House at 2 p.m. Brett, this is really what got the momentum behind the price of crude oil.
Well, that's short-term volatility only. I mean, look at the chart. That's a long-term uptrend. So it's not Twitter-based, it's not Iran-based, it's supply-demand-based. That's the ultimate driver in terms of price. But right now, yeah, we've got a short-term spike, and it's we're not trading against it. We've been buying at Canoe. We've been buying oil strategically. So this is just a speed bump called a molehill.
But then what?
Well, we'll see what comes of the short term, but we, again, are long-term bulls, and we have been for quite some time. I mean, look at global oil production against global oil demand. Those two are continuing to collide as they bump along. There used to be 3-4 million barrels of surplus capacity. It's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. The only people not participating? Yeah. Canada.
Okay, let's talk about that. I know you want to talk about that. And of course, when I was reading the news and talking about Canada's competitiveness, and our finance minister, Bill Morneau, saying that we don't have a problem here in Canada, you say you laughed as you are now, but it's not funny.
It's delusional.
Okay.
Now, I flew into Canada yesterday private as one of Canada's private jets, a massive Falcon 50, gorgeous plane got on. Three big black sedans came out, and I saw a couple of recognizable politicians getting off, and who knows where they were coming from and to, but they're living in a bubble. They're living in a delusional bubble, and we were frustrated watching these folks living the high life. Again, I was traveling on business.
Like, where were you, and what did you see exactly?
Well, I was coming in from Nashville.
Okay.
It was a hockey
and you were
game.
Landing where?
I was in Toronto.
Okay.
And I don't know where they were coming from, but it's a gorgeous Falcon aircraft.
But, so you were on a private plane landing in a private?
My plane landed right beside their plane, so to speak.
Thank you.
So
trying to get the picture here.
Some recognizable people. I'm not going to name them because they were flying private and they deserve their privacy. My real point is they live in a bubble. When Morneau makes a comment saying that we are competitive on a global basis, Americans aren't investing here because they got a choice of tax rates. You pay 30, 40, 45% in Canada or 20, 21% in the US. You're not going to come to Canada by choice. So, I mean, we have Canadians rather, are actively invested in Canada for sure. We've done a great job of repositioning the Canadian oil and gas industry with our cost structure, but we still have no export capacity. Keystone XL, Energy East, let's not spend time on that. Keystone XL is bumping along, and Trans Mountain, thanks to goofiness, is still struggling.
So how does this play out, Brett? Because, you know, when you say that our politicians are living in a bubble, and they say, no, we're not. The economic data is good, it's strong, and they say that Canada is as competitive as ever. There's such a disconnect. For any of our viewers who watch us daily, as we hope they do, they're going to say, well, how do you have Finance Minister Bill Morneau say one thing on Friday, and then you're here today saying something else?
So I don't have the data. Morneau's got an advantage over me. I just live in the real world. I have real businesses making real investments. I don't know where he lives. This is the same guy who tried to tax the hell out of the entrepreneurs, says the middle class is suffering as a result of entrepreneurs getting tax breaks. That's delusional. So he's getting coached by a group of bureaucrats who have no basis in reality. And that's our frustration. When we're making investment decisions, whether it's my personal capital or Canoe, we are constantly trying to second guess what it is that the politicians are coming at us with next. The data doesn't support what he's telling us.
So how do you think this plays out on the Canadian economy, and in what time frame?
Well, Canadian dollar is where? it's down from 80, it's down from 82, it's down from 85. So as the dollar
one
weakens,
could say, though, that really occurred a couple of years ago before all of these plans kind of came out from the current federal government, and more really on the back of the Bank of Canada, who some would say really walked down that dollar.
Well, we're looking at a short-term stock chart, or a short-term dollar chart
1 month.
right now. There's April. If you looked at a couple of years, we've been in a downward trend, and the downward trend is Trudeau, Morneau enforced. And that's, if our competitiveness was compelling, it wouldn't be slipping. It's that simple. I mean, there's data for you.
Okay, so but then aside from the Canadian dollar, Brett, like when you take a look at how all of these policies might actually impact the Canadian economy, because some of the data, I mean, some of it's been a little bit weaker on the economic front, and some of it's actually held very well, which I think is surprising a lot of people, and probably also giving the federal government a longer leash. So when do you think, or do you think we'll actually see a real economic slowdown and maybe the potential for a recession? Do you see that coming?
I don't see recession. I don't see slowdown, but we are seeing strength on a global basis. I mean, the economies on a global basis are strong, and we're getting carried, as they often say, even turkeys can fly in the wind. And there's a strong enough wind on a global basis. But remember, we're struggling with NAFTA. We're struggling with Pacific Rim trade. We're struggling living in the shadow of the guy who's out negotiating us on every front. Our NAFTA negotiators go in waving pillows and socks as we pretend that gender and environment are important to China. They're not at all. So we're struggling, and of course we're finally now getting to the trade deal. I mean, the NAFTA talks, they say, are within days, weeks, maybe, but not months, and very little of that's going to be related to the original agenda that we put out. We're losing.
The original agenda in terms of what Canada wants.
Diversity and gender and the economy, or the environment, things like that aren't part of international trade negotiations in the ordinary course, and won't be on the table at the end. Are
you optimistic about NAFTA renegotiations? Or it doesn't sound like it when you talk about the negotiators themselves.
Well, I'm underwhelmed with the negotiators, given the position that they were given by our politicians. The delusional moments again. But the negotiators themselves are plenty skilled. I'm not worried about that. But when you go in, again, waving pillows and blankets, as opposed to real dollars and true economic trade information and opportunities, it's a loss. Lose.
But as a business owner, are there certain areas within the economy that you are more nervous about, or less now, with how the NAFTA renegotiations are going?
Well,
in other words, if we take a look at some of the automotive stocks, they've been very resilient. The Canadian automotive companies have been very resilient, even in the face of the NAFTA renegotiations, which would tell you that the market certainly believes that the conclusion will be favorable to the Canadian automotive sector. Are you in that camp?
Didn't we just see $1.4 billion announced by Toyota, I think it is,
yes,
for reinvestment in Canada? So clearly people are willing to play, but there's going to be some swing, short-term swing. Trump has already made it clear that he doesn't like any of the dumping of steel, whether it's aluminum or steel, and he doesn't want it to happen through the back door of the auto sector. So they're watching and protecting the U.S. interests. The U.S. is tired of being pushed around by other markets, and
are they
saying
right? Are they right?
I think China's probably been pretty hard on them. They've taken advantage of the U.S. U.S. are consumers. They're blindly consuming at a frantic pace, and they want the lowest cost production. And sometimes they forget that the lowest cost production costs them jobs. And Trump has said no more on that. Trudeau's out doing pajama parties and having different fun events around the world, but Trump has been taking the world to task.